Let's first look at Anthem Blue Cross versus Blue Shield of California for the individual family market. And 99% of that these days is through Cover California, our exchange. The reason being is there are subsidies that can reduce the cost of coverage. You can get richer versions of the Silver. Now in 2025, we have that Silver 73 available regardless of health. That's almost a gold level plan for the same price of Silver. There's no real reason to go off exchange anymore. So we have the same benefits across the board between Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Then what's different? A couple things. It really comes down to network. Blue Shield is pretty much the last true PPO plan available to individual families. Like we have in small business, they're basically it for individual family. It's a smaller network than the small business network, but it's still a PPO. And so a lot of people who just want a PPO or their doctors and hospitals will only participate with a PPO. And that's across the board. You have really big hospitals, be it the UCs, for example, or others, where they will only work with that PPO. Then that kind of makes a decision for them, even though the PPO tends to be more expensive, usually the most expensive plan on the market. And then Anthem, on the other hand, Anthem Blue Cross went with EPOs and they went with HMOs. An EPO is like a PPO, except you don't have benefits when you go out of network other than a true emergency. So really it's a question of network, and of course that figures into the pricing. The HMOs are going to be pretty comparable in terms of pricing, so it's a question of where your doctor participates. The PPO is much more expensive, and then the EPO, it kind of depends. It's a little bit higher than the HMO usually, but make sure to run your quotes to see what makes sense for you. One other key difference with Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield is if you need providers in other states. For example, you may be up in Tahoe and all your providers are in Carson City. Well, in that case, you would want to look at the Anthem EPO, because as of right now, this can change, so check in with us. It's the only plan that still has the Blue Card Network access, which allows you to see Blue Cross Blue Shield providers in other states. So if that is something you need, or if you spend time split between here and another state, definitely check into the Anthem EPO if it's available in your area, because that's a big difference. Otherwise, it comes down to networks and pricing, because the core benefits are identical when you're in Cover California between Anthem and Blue Shield. All right, let's talk about Anthem Blue Cross versus Blue Shield of California for the Medicare market. And there really are two distinct segments we have to look at. And in one segment, Medicare supplements, they are very dominant in terms of pricing and in terms of how they work within the state. On the other side, for Advantage plans, it's a little bit different, where they're coming on strong and they're doing it in a unique way or segment of that market. And we'll look at that. First, supplements. Supplements are the PPO flavor of Medicare. We've talked about Medicare Advantage versus supplements in depth in other videos. But for the most part, you refer yourself out. You're not locked into a region. You can go anywhere in the US to any provider who accepts Medicare. So it's kind of like the PPO world of things. Blue Shield and Anthem Blue Cross are two of the big three in this market, with United Health ART being the third. Health Net's kind of like a runner-up. But really, Shield and Anthem, depending on where we run the quotes, can be dominant. And the benefits are the same. A G plan is standardized, so it's the same as a G plan with another carrier. The networks are identical. Any provider accepts Medicare. So really it comes down to pricing and kind of customer satisfaction, and those are pretty comparable for the big carriers. So pricing, when we run those quotes at age 65 or even older, Shield and Anthem typically are number 1 and 2 for the most popular plan being the G plan. So you can run the numbers at our website or down below, but really they dominate that side of things, and probably a good 2/3, maybe even 3/4 of the market goes that direction, with United Health being the third option. And then finally, Medicare Advantage plans, completely different. Medicare Advantage plans have not been as competitive a move or market for Blue Shield and Anthem Blue Cross. Where they are starting to do well are in the special need plans. So the D-SNPs, the C-SNPs, things where if you have Medi-Medi or Medicare Medi-Cal, you'll start to see Blue Shield and Anthem have broader networks and have more competitive options depending on the area you're in. So that's kind of an exciting growth area for them in terms of Medi-Medi. Also, you'll see them for certain networks where there are providers or hospitals we want access to in certain areas, because they tend to be in a lot of different regions, not the most populous like LA, but more regional or local areas, then they come up number 1 and 2 sometimes, if not the only carriers, because those more rural areas don't have a lot of options. And Shield and Anthem have really tried to be everywhere that they can be. So in some situations, they'll be the de facto Advantage plan option, especially if we're looking at a D-SNP, which is Medi-Medi, Medicare, you're getting additional help, Medicare, Medi-Cal, or C-SNP, chronic health issues. And so that's where they're really trying to push and make their angle. And those are the 2 different markets for Medicare, very different. It makes sense to run your quote to see who comes up best, who has your doctors and hospitals, which may be the deciding factor in a lot of situations. Of course, we're happy to walk through that with you. Finally, Blue Shield of California versus Anthem Blue Cross for small business, which is 1 to 100 employees in California. Here, it really depends on the area, the demographics, meaning age, dependent status, and the type of plan you're looking at. You can't say one carrier is going to be the best value for all groups across California. They're very competitive, but one will tend to shine in a certain area versus another. And in some areas, neither of them are the dominant or best value versus some other big plans or carriers out there. But in some areas, they're very sharp. And so what we usually like to do is we'll run a quote for a small group. We'll pick a level, a benchmark level, usually the silver plan, which is so popular, and we'll see who's priced better. And usually the carriers will have different options at each level. For example, they'll have 5 different silver plans. Well, in that case, we know how to pick the equivalent plan between the 2 to compare them accurately. And then once we establish, okay, Anthem is cheaper in your area for your company's setup, then we can price all the other levels, bronze, silver, gold, platinum, depending on what you want. And even we can look at different networks, HMO, PPO, HSA, depending on what you want. But first, we like to find that benchmark on who's priced better in a given area for a given demographic, because it really is all over the board. It could be Shield in one area, it could be Anthem in another area, or it depends on how the group is made up, their age. You can't say definitively one is going to be a better value. We run that quote, and then also know you can wrap either of them potentially around Kaiser if they're available in your area, and you have certain employees who want Kaiser, certain who want either a PPO, so we could go to Anthem or Blue Shield for that, where they're really strong. We can wrap it so it's all one package. The employees get a worksheet where it'll show Kaiser versus Anthem or Kaiser versus Blue Shield, and they'll be able to pick from those plans. And as an employer, you can designate how much you want to contribute as a percentage of a certain plan as a fixed dollar. You can even pick the Kaiser plan as your basis, and then if someone wants a PPO with Shield, which is probably more expensive, they'll pay more out of pocket, but it makes sense for them in their situation. They want access to certain doctors. So that's typically what we do with small groups when we're looking at Blue Shield versus Anthem. Otherwise, it's very hard to say one is stronger than the other in that marketplace.